But we can go ahead and get started with the questions. And so, question for you guys, just so context and background, how did you guys meet?
She slid into my deed.
We're supposed to tell the truth here.
Good.
That is
Just tell the truth.
So my dad has a sports facility called Top Achievers, and so they would have summer camps, they would have basketball training, cross training, football training, and so her brother is my age, we're 2 years apart, and they used to go there whenever I was 7, she was 5, so we've known of each other. We're not like childhood sweethearts like most people would think.
We're not.
Oh gosh, don't do that. But we reconnected my junior year of college via social media, and we hit it off pretty quickly. What?
I was just smiling. He just walked in. But with that, so we can hop into the questions. What would you guys say, because you guys are obviously married and you guys were single before you were married, what would you say to someone what's the benefits of being single? Because a lot of times we want to hop into relationships, we want to hop into marriage, but you guys know there's benefits before you guys got married. What's the benefit of being single?
I'll talk about this one. So I think a lot of people, and I was guilty of this before, is we treat dating or the idea of marriage like shopping, where we have these ideas of this is what I want in a woman, this is what I want in a man, but I think it can be harmful to want someone to fulfill your checklist more than you want to be intentional about how you're going to serve the marriage. So we have a generation of people who are more concerned about this is what I want, not how can I work it myself so I can serve my husband, how I can serve my wife once the opportunity does present itself. And so I think singleness helps you to discover how sufficient relationship with Christ is, because I was sitting down. Does anyone know who Ebola is? Ebola? Yeah, so I was probably about, must have been 5 years ago, we were at Chipotle eating, and I was like, Ebola, I'm a good dude, I want a woman, and I was talking about, my desire for a wife, and she was like, do you think that you might be idolizing the idea of marriage or relationship? And I said, no. But I went home and I was like, I'm definitely an idol. I'm definitely idolizing this idea of what relationship means. And so it really gave me the opportunity to redefine my relationship with Christ so that whenever I did get married or into a relationship, my relationship with my wife was just an overflow. It wasn't me depending on her to fill me up. Did you want to give?
Yeah, I definitely echo what Malcolm said, but also I think just practically asking yourself the right questions. Do I love God more than I'm going to love my future spouse? And I think that the church does a really good job at teaching, how to prepare for marriage, but I would ask myself the question, am I learning how to be good in my singleness or good at being single? And when I say good, I don't mean like human goodness. I'm talking about, am I fully content in the Lord in my singleness? And I think that's a really powerful question, and just having someone maybe who's in a season ahead of you really walking through that, like someone who disciples you or mentors you. Am I being held accountable in the sense of, where those heart checks? Is the Lord of my life, or am I looking forward to marriage as my end destination for my faith? So I think there's a good distinction.
That's good too, how you put it, like not idolizing something, because it can be a relationship, being married. Idolizing anything is harmful to you and sinful. So I think it's anything you want more than God, it won't last and it won't be good for you, because you want God to bless it, you want God to be with that. But question for you guys before we move, a question for them. Malcolm discussed this, and maybe you want to ask this. You wanted to ask them, what do they look for in a significant other?
Yeah, I just want to hear from some people in the room, like what are some of the things that you desire?
And just shout it out, just like give me just a one word.
Yeah.
Loyal.
Loyal. Yes.
Prayerful.
Unifying. Prayerful. Kind. Faithful. Loves the Lord. Honest. Compassionate.
Caring.
Say it. Confident.
What did you say?
Trustworthy.
Caring and loyal.
Caring and loyal.
Controlled in the spirit.
Controlled in the spirit.
Controlled in the spirit.
Consistent. Kindness. I think those are all awesome things to
Those
look
are
forward to.
good. And I think the question you ask yourself is, because I had all these things as well. We both had these things. And I had this list, and I remember someone said, well, would the person on that list want you? Like, is the person that you, this ideal person that you want, are you preparing yourself for this person? Is what you want in alignment with what you're willing to do for yourself in your life? How are you going to benefit that person? So I think those are kind of the foundational things that I feel like people need to ask themselves, that I had to ask myself before committing to my wife.
So if you want your spouse to work out, you should work out too. That's what you're saying.
I tell them that every week.
And I also think too, like obviously I'm not married, I'm learning, I'm here taking notes myself, mental notes, and so, because I'm trying to get to y'all's class too, but all in God's timing, of course. But I think too, what I learned from just relationships, just in general, it's so important that when we enter relationships, a lot of times we look for, what can I get? What can I get? How can this person help me? And if you go into a relationship with that mindset, you're not ready to be in a relationship, because relationship is about giving. And if you're ready to give, you're ready to be in a relationship, ready to give your time, sacrifice your feelings, wherever it may be. A lot of times, naturally, I feel like we're selfish, we want to be comfortable, but that person you're with, whoever your relationship, whether it's a significant other relationship, whether it's a friendship, a co-worker, you want to make sure you're always able to give. And so let's move forward to y'all's marriage. What's some pieces of your marriage that, like, hey, I was not expecting this? Or maybe something like, oh, I thought I was healed from this, and that made you feel vulnerable in that in y'all's relationship.
I told him I'd preface this. So when you get married, you literally join your life together. Like, I don't know, I got married when I was 21. I don't know if I really in fact, I'll just say, I did not understand the concept of joining your life with someone. And I had my own room my whole life. I had done my own laundry my whole life. I had done dishes the way that I do dishes my whole life. So that, even just those small things, like, stuff creeps up in marriage, it just really does. And then our upbringings, I had a lot of unlearning to do from things in my past, or just even upbringing, everyone has a very unique upbringing, and good and bad, but like there are some things that the Lord just like takes the scales off your eyes in marriage, and it's like, oh, that's what I've been doing my whole life, or that's how I've been viewing, what my husband should be. And so you can add some details.
I think I want to get transparent. So I think a lot of people deal with sexual sin, whether it be pornography, whether it be lusting, whether it be whatever it is. And I feel like some Christians believe that once you get married that those things go away, or that once you get married that it's like, okay, now I can do it with this one person, so therefore the desire is going to go away. And the truth is that if you don't deal with it before, it's still going to leak in some type of way. Am I okay to continue on this? So, like before we got married, speaking about vulnerability, so one of my most vulnerable moments to my wife was also the most valuable moment in my testimony. So, to give y'all context, I grew up and I waited to marriage to have sex, but I struggled with pornography for a while. And there was one night, my wife was studying in Oxford, and I was in Michigan, and the Lord told me to tell her, and I was like, I'm not telling this. I was like,
1 month into dating.
And I was like, I'm not doing this because one, I don't date around like this. Like, I waited 3 years to even date a girl, so I'm not about to tell her this and this is over. So I tried to go to sleep, and he wouldn't let me sleep. And I remember I texted her, and it was a different time, so it took her some time. I was like, man, can you take it back? Like, can you break up with me? But she responded, she said, we're gonna get through this together. And since that day, I have not struggled with that temptation at all. And I think it was because I was able to be vulnerable in that moment, that created value for God to do what only He could do. And I think if I try to hide that, and I know men right now who try to hide it from their wife, and it showed up in their marriage one way or another, and it's just detrimental if you don't deal with it.
And I want to add on too, before Malcolm and I were dating in that time, I was dating this other guy maybe like 2 or 3 years ago as well. Okay. And so, and he had confessed the same thing, that he had been struggling with pornography too, and like I had recently gotten saved, and like everyone who was giving me wise counsel at the time, rightfully so and reasonably so, was saying, oh yeah, like if he struggles with this type of sexual sin, like he's not ready to date. And so when he told me, and not Malcolm, past boyfriend he, and he said he had confessed that to me, and I had acted in a way that was not, the default was not grace, let me just say that. And and granted, yeah, well anyway, whenever Malcolm had shared that with me first month into dating, I was like, Lord, like, what is it with this? Like, what's happening? I thought you saved me from this, you know? Like, I waited, I prayed, I fasted, you know, what's happening? And then it was like in Acts when Stephen couldn't talk, like, I literally couldn't, I mean, Malcolm had texted me, but everything in me, like the Spirit just told me, give him grace, give him grace. And so even as much as I wanted to act in a way of disgust, or even in just a mean way, an ungodly way, the Lord would not let me, because He had wanted to deliver me from that attitude in my past. And so really learning as well, because you know the Lord will bring things up if you haven't, keep bringing things up if you haven't learned the first time.
That's good. That's good. So with that, let's stay on that topic for a little bit. Just, you know, sexual purity. When you're in a relationship, like things get heavy. You know, you may spend a long time with the person you're with, and you may not want. Maybe you're trying to wait till marriage, or you know, not to have sex. You're not even playing the gray areas. You know, because I know sometimes be like, it's not the real thing, so it's okay. Like, nah, it's all that. But what boundaries did you guys set to remain sexually pure?
So it's a horrible assumption to think that you're strong enough without having accountability. So we try to do that, like, we're just gonna pray before we get together. But we got to a point I would call someone. Oh, well, okay, this is hard, yeah. So you said heavy, yeah. So we did distance, so we didn't see each other a whole bunch. So that made it a little bit more difficult, because we only saw each other probably once or twice a month. And so we were excited to see each other. So we had to get to a point where we called someone every single time before we hung out and said, make sure that we are not with each other past this time. Because I think a part of spiritual maturity and sexual purity is knowing where to not trust yourself. Like, I will always be a man who's attracted to my wife. You should want to have sex with the person that you're gonna marry. I mean, that should be one of the things. And so, but how do you preserve it in a way that honors the Lord? And so we had to set pretty strict boundaries of, you know, we're gonna be in open settings, we're gonna be gone by this time. And some people, I know some people who wouldn't even be in private together. I mean, we wouldn't even touch or hold hands, so we didn't do that, but we did what we needed to do to survive. It's survival, let me tell you.
I think one more thing with your perception too, like, until that person is your spouse, until you have witnesses before you and you make a covenant before God, that is not your spouse. And so if I am dishonoring another woman by, you know, lusting over or committing sexual sin, which I confess I have before, you know, and so I'll be the first one to tell you, like, that is not your husband or that is not your wife until you make a covenant before God in a marital ceremony. And so just keeping that, if anything, if it's your physical that you're fighting or if it's your mental that you're fighting, that is definitely something that helped me preserve purity in my heart, and also whenever I would be with Malcolm, just remembering that he's not my husband until we say I do.
And even like chiming in on that. Just when you have sex outside marriage, you know, it's a soul tie, and God says through the act of sex, like that's a covenant. That's becoming one. Because the eyes of God, sex is like you're marrying someone. That's the covenant. And so that's a lot of times when if you have sex, when people in the relationship, they go crazy sometimes because like, okay, because a piece of them, because you're one, you know, is still with that person. And so that's why it's so important, you know, to do it with the person you're going to marry with, because soul ties are real. Like, and sometimes you say, why are people saying these toxic, crazy relationships? It's because they're one. You know, they feel like that's still them back there in that relationship. And obviously God, with asking God for forgiveness, He can restore and make you whole. Of course, He can still do that, but just know that every time you do that, you know, you're not asking forgiveness, you're leaving a piece of you with another person. You know, they have something of you. And they also have something that's your husband's or has something that's your wife's. And it's just so important that we try our best to remain pure. Because we all, for me, like I said, I'll be honest, I fell short in that category. I've told you guys this multiple times. But I know, you know, years ago, like God forgave me for that. And that's the thing, like you said, to be done having sex with your significant other or wherever you're at, like that's not gonna happen overnight. It's a process just with everything, or just whether sexual sin maybe, it's a process, a day by day thing, and just a day by day surrender. But let's do something a little bit lighter, you know. What about people, like we have some Christian men in the room and some Christian women in the room. Like how do you, like date as like how do you shoot your shot as a Christian man, and then how do you as a woman, you know, seem available but not like too available like that? Because you know some people just say, you know, try to posture up, you know. So like Malcolm, like how and then how would y'all answer that?
I can only speak for the men. I'm very direct, and like I said, I wasn't someone who dated around a whole bunch. I wasn't someone that my eye was never just always on the swivel. Can I talk to her? It was like there were a couple of things. There were three things. Someone who loved God more than she would love me. Someone who had a good sense of who she was without me, and then someone who would make me a better person. Like those were the three things. And then if I was physically attracted to her, that I would pursue. So for me, my wife and I hung out for 9 days straight, and I mean literally on the 9th day we were on the couch and I said, we've been hanging out for 9 days straight. Either we need to stop hanging out because it's not wise, or we need to establish what this relationship is. And I'm ready to commit to you. My man.
That's not normal, by the way. So I was like.
And I said, I'm just ready to commit to you. I said, you can take your time, but I'm just saying where I stand. And so she 2 days later, or 1 day, whatever it was, she's like, I'm ready. Hey.
I didn't say hey at the end. I just said I'm ready. Period.
But I think being direct, 'cause I feel like a lot of this is my frustration, and it's like a lot of people try to hint things, or they try to be subliminal, or say I'm gonna do this and see how she be. Like, man, if this is how you feel, be okay being denied, because the woman who God has in store for you, it's gonna work out if you put yourself out there. So if the worst thing is no, it's no, but like be clear, be direct. If you like the girl, look at her in the eye, try not to text if you don't have to text. Like, it's nerve-wracking, but it's authentic, and I think the woman also appreciates it.
Yeah, I mean, I had never experienced anyone, probably male or female, in any relationship be as direct as Malcolm. So when he told me he was ready to commit to me, that's why it took 2 days, because I was like, Lord, did he really just say that? And like, what does that mean? And so I think another thing for women too, and like, I totally understand like the struggle of like that medium or virtuous medium of being modest, but you know, communicating availability, but like, I don't know how else to say it without sounding like really cheesy, so hold on.
Say it.
Yeah, go in.
Well, I mean, I just really believe, so whenever I went through a season of singleness, as I call it, and it was very intentional, and it was literally when I had felt like my cup was full, that the Lord brought Malcolm into my life. And Malcolm wasn't even, like, I didn't even know if I was attracted to Malcolm, because when we reconnected, like, the last time I saw Malcolm was when we were like 10. And so I didn't even know. He was just literally a friend. And so for me, it was just, wow, this is a good friendship. I guess if we meet up and I'm attracted to him, maybe this is something. But I think really just being content in yourself, and I mean, it's hard for women, I'll say that. It is hard, and I know, but I think especially in the way that God has set up man and female romantic relationships, I really think that men, y'all need to, I'm gonna exhort y'all need to normalize being direct, and y'all need to, like, don't play guessing games. And women, like, if y'all are feeling like these men are playing, or boys are playing guessing games, sorry. Well, I'm not sorry, but like, if you have to guess if someone likes you, that's going to translate into your marriage too. And you don't want to guess in your marriage if someone is committed to you. You just don't. And so they're gonna set the tone from the very beginning. And like, yes, there will be growth in the process, and you should acknowledge and celebrate that. Like, Malcolm was not perfect in the beginning. I was not perfect in the beginning. We're not at all perfect right now. But there was never a guessing. I never had to guess where Malcolm stood. And so I just encourage y'all, like, people do what they want to do at the end of the day. They really do. And so if they want to make time for you, ladies, if you're wondering if he likes you, it should be clear, in my opinion. That's not the word, but it's my opinion.
Okay. That's good. Moving on, I know Hebrews 3:4, God talks about him being the builder of everything. And a lot of times, I believe God is the builder of something that's broken too. Sometimes people don't want to get relationships because maybe a man or woman has hurt them. Maybe they cheated on them, or maybe they didn't treat them right, or physical abuse, or whatever it may be. You don't want to enter another relationship because of hurt. So what would you say to somebody who's maybe afraid of entering a relationship because of their past hurt, or something that happened in their past? They don't think that a guy they can put their trust in another man or another woman.
Yeah. So funny story. Ours.
No, it's funny.
It's funny.
Now it's funny.
So the second time, one of our second dates, or second time hanging out, I guess our second day of dating, we were in the car, and were you crying?
I wasn't.
Oh.
I wasn't crying.
She wasn't crying, but she made a statement. She said, "I don't want to hurt you," and I was like, "Don't, don't hurt me." But what happened is that she had had relationships with other men, with other boys that did not end well. And it was a matter of not being able to trust. It was a matter of a truth and then experiences. And so I think sometimes when you have making your experiences the truth can be dangerous, because there are a lot of things that she was insecure about me because of past relationships. And so it took new experiences to build a new truth. I feel like that's kind of something about that people fall into. It's like, man, you gotta get to a point where you trust God enough to say, Lord, if you're gonna place me with this man, if you're gonna place me with this woman, I'm gonna trust that you're gonna make out of it what you want it to be. But a lot of times we try to manufacture relationships, and that's where it ends up being, hurtful to us in the end. Did you want to share something else?
Yeah, I was just gonna say too, like, whenever there are unspoken expectations, that's where disappointment leaks in. Because if you never share, like, if I never shared with Malcolm and not expectations in a controlling way, but like, we're faithful, right? Or we are, we respect each other, just like expectations for your relationship, because every relationship is different. Like, the way that Malcolm and I communicate with each other, it will be different than, Austin and his wife, or, definitely different than the way my parents communicated to each other. And so each relationship kind of has its own norms. And so, but like, for example, one expectation that Malcolm and I have, and y'all can, think what you want about it, but Malcolm and I, we share our location indefinitely with each other. And that's not because we're insecure, but our expectation is that it doesn't matter where we are, it should be honoring to each other, or just even for safety purposes. And now, I know some people have opinions about that, but that is just something for our relationship that we do, that we communicated. And so it just removes all confusion. So there's no disappointment if I were to call Malcolm and say, hey, can you be here in like 30 minutes? Oh, sorry, I can't. I'm an hour out. Where are you? Like, that is not even in our type of communication because we removed assumptions at the front end.
That's good. I want to kind of chime off what you said, and just like expressing what you need, you know, what you want. Like an unvoiced need can never be met. Your significant other, whoever you're in a relationship with, they can't meet that need if they don't know what that need is. And so, like, if you're dealing with hurt, like, it's okay, be open with that hurt, you know? And that person who's going to love who you're supposed to be with will be understanding that yes, you are whole, but you may still be hurt in certain areas. And the person that God has for you in any type of relationship, they'll be understanding of your hurts, and not just only understanding, they can help you walk through those hurts, through those pains. And so I want to move on to something that I would say people in my past, women in my past, I've heard sisters, friends have not liked saying a woman to submit themselves to their husbands. A lot of times they hear the word submit, you're like, submit to who? To submit to what? Like, no. So what does it mean? Because I believe God says in Ephesians 5:22, women, submit yourselves to your husbands. What does it mean to submit, and what does it look like to submit?
To submit in marriage, it really is just an extension of your surrender to the Lord. And when I say that, I submit to Malcolm in a godly, biblical way because I have surrendered my life to Jesus. And when I say that, I mean the reason why I can give Malcolm that role in our household as, leader of our home is because he is a man worthy of leading our home. And when I say he's a man worthy of leading our home, it's because he has submitted his life to Jesus. And so this is the godly order that the Lord has given to us in the Bible. And so because because Malcolm has surrendered, I am able to trust him as the leader in our home. And another thing too, ladies, and I've been reading a lot about this lately, we are not the Holy Spirit for our husbands. We're not. And that doesn't mean that they can do, whatever their flesh tells them to, because if they're a man of the word, they're not going to. They're going to deny themselves constantly of their flesh. But when I say we're not the Holy Spirit of the Lord, it's not my job to convict Malcolm of his wrongdoings or of things that he annoys me or irritates me, because yes, it does happen in marriage, but he's not perfect. But yeah, we are not responsible for convicting our husbands. We pray and we intercede for them because that is the role that the Lord has given us. And yes, we encourage them. Yes, there are things that I do point out in Malcolm and he points out in me, but that's because there's a mutual respect. And just because he is headship of our home and I am using biblical words and submitted, there's still equal contribution. We're still equally yoked. We still need each other in the same way that Malcolm needs me, although it may look differently, I need him.
Yeah, I would also add to this, because I think we sometimes give too much attention to just wives submit, but like in Ephesians 5:22 it says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. It says submit, the same author is saying, submit to one another. And so out of reverence for Christ, and I think the one that you read, and it says, and husbands love your wife as Christ loved the church. And I feel like the intention is like, if the husband is taking care of business as a husband, loving his wife the same way that Christ would love us, the wife wouldn't have issues saying, okay, I'm gonna follow your leadership. But what happens is people read that verse and there's not a trust that my man would do that. And there are a lot of imperfect men, but the hope is that there would be two people who are married who are submitted to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ and who are willing to do that for him. So
I want to add a practical
Go
too.
ahead.
Just practical in thought. Malcolm would literally die for me, and I know that. And like he has expressed that. And so like why wouldn't I trust him if that is the ultimate end he would go to for me? He's a man worthy of submitting to, in my opinion, in our marriage.
And that's it, but that's also a commandment. Like that's our calling. We're supposed to be willing to lay our life down for our wives, for our spouse, and to say, I'm going to do whatever I can do to make sure that you can have a life that's honoring to the Lord. And I feel like when that happens, there's not a lot of trouble saying, I'll listen to you. I'll listen to you.
One of my last questions is, prayer is so powerful. What's the benefit of praying with your significant other while you're married? But do you feel like it's bad to pray with, let's say you're just boyfriend and girlfriend praying with each other? How do you guys feel about that? And what's also the power of prayer in y'all's relationship?
Yeah. Well, so before we started praying, and this is probably an outlier, but the way we started talking was I asked her, how can I be praying for you? And then she asked me, how can I be praying for you? So we began that relationship doing that. But I would say if you're dating with someone and you're not sure if they're your husband or if they're your wife, I would say to be careful with how much you're investing spiritually in them, because when you're building momentum with someone spiritually that you're not going to commit to in the long run, you're also, it's not the same thing sexually, but there are certain things intimately that happen spiritually that was meant only for marriage. And so I'm not saying that prayer is bad, but I'm saying we have to be careful because it can be hard. You invest in someone spiritually, you connect spiritually, and then you don't end up committing to them. Or let's say that you end up, it doesn't end bad, but you're married to someone, but you still have these spiritual experiences with someone else. It could be, yeah.
I want to add a clarifier.
Yeah.
And whenever Malcolm and I, when we reconnected, we how can I pray for you? It didn't look like us calling each other and praying for each other over the prayer requests that we shared with each other. We would follow up with each other after we prayed for one another based off the prayer requests that each of us shared independently. And also we were doing distance too. And so I think that is a good starting point to begin discerning and asking the Holy Spirit to help you discern, okay, how much is wise, or what is going to be a wise way to pray for and maybe pray with the person I'm dating. Because when Malcolm is talking about when you invest yourself spiritually with someone, it's not like a sexual soul tie, a physical soul tie like we were talking about earlier, but you all of a sudden, your emotional and spiritual capacity could be leaning on someone who may not be your significant other, your future spouse. And that's not wise. That's the distinction.
That's good. And I want to move on to just examples of godly relationships, or what should set the standard. Because we sometimes say, okay, these are relationship goals. We see, okay, matching shoes, matching clothes, whatever, cars, whatever it may be. Or examples of relationships that we see in society, entanglements, or it's okay if it's an entanglement, whatever it may be. So what would you say, and I want to end on this, are relationship goals for a couple that's striving to serve Christ and serve Christ's purposes?
So my wife and I live for 7 words, and those 7 words are, well done, my good and faithful servant. And one day when we stand before God, it's not going to be my wife and I. She will stand before God, and I'm going to stand before God. And one thing we talk about is our duty, our honor, our privilege is to prepare one another for the moment where we stand before God. And so I want to prepare her, and when I say prepare, I'm not talking about manipulating, but I'm saying I want to encourage her, pray for her, challenge her, so that when she stands before Him, that He can say, well done, my good and faithful servant. I don't want anything more than that for my wife, and the same thing for her to me. And so for me, that's success. Because we're not talking about a worldly success where you have a house and you have an Instagram with followers and you have cute kids. I'm talking about when the kingdom of God looks down and watches us and they're rejoicing at the way we're living our life. Like that's an eternal success that we're looking for.
That's good. And do you have anything to say on that?
I mean, that if you can grasp that, that covers basically everything. If you are pursuing those words and to live in such a way that at the end of it, the way judgment goes, well done, my good and faithful servant, I mean, yes. And I just think if you are, and I think just another practical relationship goal, because that one is very, I mean, it's a lot to unpack too, but I think also just making sure that you're equally yoked with the person that you're with. I think that is a huge relationship goal because, and when I say equally yoked, I mean, you know, you're on one accord with your values. You know, you aren't one yet, but like you're on one accord. Each of you are on fire for Christ, or each of y'all are pursuing the word relentlessly, you know? And so being equally yoked, so there's no, oh, well, you don't believe that, so I'm just gonna go do my service here while you stay over there. And even though I disagree with that, you know, you should feel like you can be your 100% self in Christ with that person.
Thank you guys. You guys give a hand for Anna.